Hello everyone and welcome back to my actual office. I am here today to talk to you about the lecture covering Gorgias and Isocrates, which was what I believe I had you read for today if you're following along the schedule. If you're not, then hopefully that identifier will help you when you get there. I wanted to clean up a few things about what's going on the grade book. I did go in and enter everything I could into the grade book on Blackboard. Some of the things that I have assigned don't have due dates yet. Some of them I can't put anything into the Blackboard like tests, for example, but I was able to create a column and put the amount, the number of points that it's worth, and also a due date so that you'll have sort of an idea of when things are coming along. The Pick a Theorist assignment does not yet have a due date, and that's mainly because I'm going to have you all do that on your own time based on what theorist I assign you. So I'll be assigning that to you, and then you'll have plenty of time to research that theorist and do a little presentation on it as described in the syllabus. Hopefully that helps. If you have any questions, of course, as always, email me. Today I want to talk to you about Gorgias and his work, Enchonium on Helen, as well as Isocrates and his two works, Antidosis and Against the Sophists. Let's start with Gorgias. Now, what we do know about Gorgias is that he was a sophist. So he was a teacher of rhetoric. And one of the things that we also know during this very early time period in human history is that we were still doing things sort of orally. We were in the oral tradition, and we were in the process of passing down knowledge and education through through words, through language. We had not yet gotten to the point where we were really in the literary era, so we weren't really writing down a lot. But those who learned through this oral tradition passed it on until somebody decided that it was a good idea to write it down. And that's what we're reading today, is what got written down many years after the actual theorist supposedly wrote them or conceived of them. That doesn't make his arguments any less valid. And this really is one of the first pieces of quote-unquote rhetoric that we have and that we've identified. It's certainly the first work that we know of on rhetoric specifically. I don't know if Gorgias knew that at the time or not, but basically what he wanted to do was he wanted to take a truth that was generally accepted, which was that Helen of Troy was guilty of starting the war in Troy. Now, he wanted to take that accepted truth based on the epic poetry, and he wanted to change it. He wanted to give Helen a eulogy, an enchonium, that sort of put a new perspective on how the world should view Helen. Basically, that we shouldn't blame her so much for what happened. And he gives us a few reasons for that. So let's talk about the themes that come out in this enchonium on Helen that you read. First of all, I hope you enjoyed reading it. It has some references that may be unclear. There's some language and some grammar that might be unclear, and I want to talk about that for just a moment before we get into the themes and the content. First of all, it's probably important to know that I don't expect you to be able to read Greek. So any Greek words that are written, please just look at the footnote or ignore it, because usually it has some context to it. And so we are not learning Greek. Please have no fear of that in this classroom. The second thing is you'll notice that some of the words are capitalized. And of course, the reason why we capitalize certain things is because they're proper nouns, or, for example, names of things. And they're generally given to entities or to things that can act. So, for example, nowadays we don't capitalize the word love. However, in this work, you will notice that love is capitalized, fate is capitalized, a few others that I can't, fortune, I believe, a couple other words I can't think of at the moment right off the top of my head, but you'll see those capitalized proper nouns. Why are they capitalized? Why are they proper nouns? Well, because back then they firmly believed that these were not just concepts or ideas or words, but that they were representational of sort of like gods or goddesses or things that could impact your life. So when he uses the word love and he capitalizes it, he's talking about some sort of entity called love that could, make people do something. Fate being capitalized, the capital F in fate. It's what fate wants for you. So you don't have a choice in the matter, because it's sort of this being larger than ourselves that forces us to do things. And certainly we don't really ascribe to that particular definition anymore. However, if we think about it in terms of they had, the goddess of love, they had the goddess of beauty, they had the gods of war, the god of wine and song. You have all these different gods. Think about it in terms of the goddess of love, the fates, those people in a certain characterization of them, that they can actually do things to us and impact what we choose to do. So knowing that, you go into this reading and you know beforehand that this is another eulogy for Helen. Well, what are some of the themes that come out? First of all, we know he doesn't want to blame Helen for the war. That's pretty much the entirety of the thesis of his work here. The question is, why shouldn't she be blamed? And he comes up with a varied number of reasons why she should not be blamed. One of them is so obvious. It's fate. This is what was determined to be, and so it just is what it is, and she had no control over that. Another one is that she was in love with Paris, and because of that love, went with him, and that started the war, and there was no way she could have controlled that because capital L, love. A third idea or theme in this is that she didn't have the ability to turn away from Paris because he was so persuasive. In one edition that I've read, one interpretation that I've read, they said that he was silver-tongued, that he was able to convince anybody to do anything. And therefore, she wasn't at fault, because what could she do? Another sort of hint that he gives us is that she was just not that bright. Not smart enough to figure out she didn't have to go with Paris. And so she just believed whatever he said. Not so much because he was persuasive, but because she had a very weak will. Or she just, didn't understand the implications of what was happening. And so they just, he just took her and the war started. So there are numerous reasons why we should not blame Helen of Troy for the Trojan War, which makes sense to me. There seems to be some good evidence and reasoning here from Gorgias, but that wasn't really his point. His point was that rhetoric can be used, and this is another theme, rhetoric can be used to sort of reconstruct the truth, okay? So he can actually rewrite a historical understanding, a historical fact, by merely talking about it a different way. Another part of that is that he also says towards the end of the work that he enjoyed writing this, that rhetoric is enjoyable, that it's entertainment, that playing with language in order to reconstruct something is fun. And here's where we also get into that idea, that old idea that rhetoric has no meaning. That if somebody's using rhetoric, that means that they're not saying anything. It's just pretty language. It's just nice words. It just sounds good. It's not really saying anything. That's where rhetoric gets this really bad interpretation and definition and reputation. Because Gorgias says, well, it's fun to play with the truth. Now, nobody thinks that Gorgias intended for that to come out that way, but that's sort of what we got from it, was that rhetoric can reconstruct the truth and that rhetoric was enjoyable. And then along comes our next theorist, and now we'll talk about Isocrates. And this wasn't right away. This was a number of years later. Isocrates is a teacher, and he is a sophist, of course. and he writes 2 works. One is called Against the Sophists, the other one is called Antidosis. I asked my students today, what do you think Against the Sophists is about? And they spun their words around and around trying to say, well, he was against the sophist. Absolutely, that is the main theme. He is explaining why sophists are bad. One of the reasons why they are bad is because they have no ethics. So he is introducing the idea that rhetoric should go along with ethics, that you should have the right intent to practice rhetoric. So here we get introduced to ethics, and sophists were not good because they didn't practice with ethics. What were some of the things that sophists did that made them so unethical? Well, first of all, they charged too much money for what they were giving. And they didn't just charge them money because they were teaching them rhetoric. They weren't teaching them rhetoric at all. They were teaching them how to lie, and they were only teaching them for one situation. One specific problem in the courts or in a situation like where you needed someone to speak for you or where you needed training to learn how to speak for yourself. They would charge all that money, and then the next time you needed to go speak in front of somebody, they would charge you a whole new set of costs again. And so they weren't actually teaching anyone how to do rhetoric or practice it. They were just teaching them how to get through a situation. And Isocrates thought that was bad. He thought, hey, we should actually teach people something if that's what we're going to claim that we're doing. Another reason why they were unethical is because they had no regard for the truth. They believed that the truth was useful, that it could be manipulated. It could change any which way that you wanted it to, as long as it served your purposes. And that is definitely questionable, ethically speaking. So Isocrates had a real problem with their treatment of the truth and therefore what the purpose of rhetoric actually was. And so that's a second reason why it was unethical. A third reason why it was unethical was because they made promises that they did not keep. They made promises to teach somebody how to get through these situations where they needed rhetoric over and over again, and yet they only taught them for one experience. And they charged so much for this that people in the community were not able to afford it. I mean, outside of the citizens that were senators or otherwise, people couldn't afford this. And he felt that that was a real problem because he felt education should be used to educate those who don't have access to it. So Isocrates in Against the Sophist outlines for us why the practices of the sophist are considered unethical, and therefore they're not good. He separated from the sophists and started his own school. Years later on down, after his school was established and he was clearly not friendly with the sophists, it was a tradition back then that people with money would build a ship, a warship, or some sort of war machine, or they would build a building, or they would donate a library, something big that people with a lot of money would do that would help the community. Well, they were coming to Isocrates and they were talking about 2 things. One, that he didn't build a ship or a library or put his name on a building, and he should have, because he would have had all this money from being a sophist. And the second thing that they came at him for was because in teaching the youth that they can reason for themselves, that was considered to be corrupting the youth. Now, we even see remnants of this today, right? People say that we're corrupting the youth by giving them education, showing them different perspectives or different world experiences, life experiences, that somehow this is going to change them and corrupt them to be something evil. And Isocrates had some answers for them as they critiqued him for all of these things. First of all, he said, let's get facts straight. I never made that much money. I don't have that much money. And one of the reasons why I don't have that much money is because, secondly, I reinvested in my school. I reinvested in my students. And so third, the way I'm giving back to the community has nothing to do with a building that's going to fall or a ship that might sink or a library that won't be there anymore soon. He instead says, I'm helping the community by educating the youth, by giving them the tools they need to have a successful community that goes on. And really, in a way, he was saying, your immortality you think comes through buildings and through ships and through having your name on something, a statue or whatever, but his immortality is going to come through the generations of his students that learn from him. By the way, that includes us now, that learn through him because of what he taught. And so he sets out this antidote to this attack that they're making on him, these 3 attacks that they're making on him. He has an answer for. And Socrates was put to death, having to drink hemlock, put to death because of corrupting the youth. And in the same way, Isocrates was accused of doing that. Of course, he was not murdered, but I guess we progressed a little bit, but he was certainly still accused of it. And so that was his answer to those critics. Okay, so now we know that rhetoric is fun. We know that there should be an ethical component to it, and that should be practiced with a responsibility, and that we should use it to teach the youth how to keep their communities going on forward in time. And so those are the main themes and ideas that you're supposed to get out of today's readings, and that we will carry forward through into other readings as well. Now, the last thing I wanted to tell you was that I discovered something interesting. I had told you all at the beginning of the semester, I believe, that I would probably record your videos on Monday or Sunday. And that's not going to happen. And here's why. I don't want to give you guys information that I don't give that I give my in-person class, or vice versa. So what I'm doing is every Tuesday and Thursday I teach from 2 to 3:15. And then I come into my office and I record my lecture for you. So that basically I'm giving the same lecture twice. That way you all get the equal treatment and education that you deserve. And also it keeps me sort of organized for when I give you all exams, that I'm not asking you questions you were never exposed to a discussion or an answer on. All right, that's it. I also put on Blackboard that there is going to be an assignment due. It's not due until, I think it's like February 6th or something like that. It's a little ways down the road, a couple weeks. And it's a 1 to 2 page paper or essay just telling me about what rhetoric meant to you or what you thought it meant prior to taking this class. So you don't have to give me Aristotle's definition, although if that's your definition, by all means, but I want you to tell me what the word rhetoric indicated to you prior to taking this course. Again, pretty simple. It's just an assignment for us to get our brains working and thinking about how we've been taught about rhetoric and now how we're going to learn about it. And that is it for today. I will come back on Thursday and we'll do this all again. I'll talk to you then.